sign the house over, or the wedding is off." I shouted, "No, I'm not signing anything." She went ballistic, claiming I was betraying their family by refusing to share what should be a marital asset. I, 28F, never thought I'd be sharing something this crazy, but here we go. I grew up in a pretty average suburban family. My father worked long hours at a local warehouse, my mother ran a small bakery from home, and my older brother helped with deliveries. My grandparents lived close by when I was a kid, and they were basically my second parents. They worked hard their entire lives, saved every penny, and always told me that property was one of the biggest gifts you could ever pass down. When I was 21, both of my grandparents passed away in the same year, which crushed us emotionally. They left me their small, fully paid-off house. It wasn't fancy or huge, just a 3-bedroom place with a cozy backyard, but it was jam-packed with amazing memories. After some thought, I decided to move in and make it my home. It was close to my parents, close to work, and it just felt right. For a few years, life was solid, nothing too dramatic. I worked as a front desk manager at a little hotel in town. Not the most glamorous job, but it paid my bills and was generally chill. About 2 years ago, I met my fiancé, well, ex-fiancé now, because he was a guest at that hotel. He was staying there for a friend's wedding, and he kept coming by the front desk for extra towels or directions just to chat me up. After a few days of friendly banter, he asked for my number. I thought he was sweet and a bit corny in a charming way, so I agreed. We hit it off super fast. He lived a couple hours away, but it wasn't a huge distance. We'd meet up on weekends, go on little road trips, have game nights with my brother, and do all the typical dating stuff. My parents liked him too, though they always teased me I was rushing into things. After about a year, he proposed on my birthday by hiding the ring in a big chocolate cake. It was messy as heck, but at the time, I found it adorable. Right after we got engaged, he started making these offhand comments about my house. "So, you're not planning on living here alone after we're married, right? And I'll need the biggest closet since I'll be the man of the house." It felt mostly like jokes, though I noticed a small edge to his tone. Then came the real red flags. He introduced me to his parents, who live about an hour away from me. They threw a massive engagement dinner, and that's when I discovered how pushy and entitled they could be. His mother was all about appearances. She talked non-stop about wanting the wedding of the year, complaining about details like flower arrangements, catering, even what color table linens we should have. His father was more reserved but gave off this strange vibe, like he was analyzing me the whole time. During that dinner, my fiancé casually mentioned my house, and his mother's eyes lit up. She hammered me with questions. Was it fully paid off, how big it was, its market value, and so on. It felt weirdly invasive, but I tried to give polite, general answers. I just assumed they were excited for us. After dinner, on the drive home, I told my fiancé his parents' interest in my house felt a bit intense. He brushed me off, saying they were old-fashioned and saw property as a family asset. That made me uneasy, but I let it slide to avoid starting fights right after our engagement. Things got way more complicated over the following months. His mother insisted on taking charge of wedding planning, basically treating me like a sidekick. She'd call vendors, book appointments without asking me, and then act shocked if I disagreed with something. She kept implying my parents couldn't afford a big wedding, so it was best for her to organize. My parents weren't thrilled, but they tried to be polite. I, on the other hand, was getting more and more frustrated. Then my fiancé dropped a bomb on me. One evening while we were hanging out at my place, he said we needed to talk about future living arrangements. I assumed we were on the same page, like we just live in the house I already own. But he said his parents felt it was only fair that I put the house in both of our names. That way, it would be our marital home, he explained. I suggested we could do a prenup if he was worried about fairness, but transferring the title outright was a big no for me. He got all tense, saying Mom and Dad won't like that. A shiver went down my spine when he said that. Why was he so worried about their opinion on MY property? Soon after, his father called me, talking in that condescending, a no-better tone. He said it made sense for the house to belong to both of us so we could build a future as a true family. I politely but firmly said no. I wasn't comfortable with that arrangement. If things went south, I didn't want to lose my grandparent house. He kept pushing, hinting I clearly didn't trust them or their son. From that point on, my future mother-in-law went into sabotage mode. She started changing wedding details behind my back, like telling her planner that I wanted more expensive floral arrangements or a different menu. I get random calls from confused vendors, asking why I was changing my mind so often. I realized she was impersonating me, making all these decisions in my name. When I confronted her, she'd say, "I just want what's best for you too." It was maddening. To top it off, She fed my fiancé a bunch of lies, claiming I was rude to them, accusing me of not respecting family traditions. Every time I tried to explain, he'd get defensive and say I was reading too much into things. We had blowout fights about his parents meddling, but he never fully backed me up. About a month before the wedding, my father pulled me aside. He'd heard from a cousin that my fiancé's parents were telling people my house was worthless with a crumbling foundation or something ridiculous like that. My father confronted my fiancé's dad at a family get-together, demanding to know why he was spreading rumors. My fiancé's dad pretended he had no clue what my father was talking about, making it sound like we were the paranoid ones. My fiancé barely said a word in my defense. My father suggested I postpone the wedding, but I was torn. Part of me really believed my fiancé would come to his senses and realize what jerks his parents were being. Against my better judgment, I pressed on, ignoring the giant pit in my stomach. On the wedding day, I felt dread the moment I woke up. We were supposed to get married at a fancy country club his mother had chosen. I was in a bridal suite with my mom, getting ready. My father and a few friends were there too, trying to keep things light. People started arriving, but my fiancé and his parents were nowhere in sight. I should have seen it as a major red flag. Suddenly, his mother burst into the suite, dragging him behind her like a kid in trouble. She shoved some legal documents at me, basically a transfer of partial ownership of the house. She hissed that if I didn't sign, they wouldn't proceed with the ceremony. My fiancé just stood there looking ashamed, mumbling for me to just sign it. "We'll sort it out later." I felt like my blood was on fire. I shouted, "No, I'm not signing anything." She went ballistic, claiming I was betraying their family by refusing to share what should be a marital asset. I argued back that this was my grandparents' house and they never had any right to demand ownership. His father came in, barking at me to stop throwing a tantrum, saying they'd cancel the wedding if I didn't comply. At that point, I said fine, cancel it. I didn't expect them to literally have security escort me out, but that's exactly what happened. They told the venue staff I was an unwelcome guest. I was kicked out of my own wedding. My parents and friends tried to intervene, but the staff, looking super confused, still let us out to the parking lot. My father and mother were outraged, shouting this was a breach of contract. I was so stunned I could barely speak. One minute I was about to walk down the aisle, and the next I was standing in the parking lot in my wedding dress. I kept looking over my shoulder, waiting for my fiancé to come out, to see if he'd defend me. He never showed. Some of my relatives started leaving, while others tried to see if we could get back in. The venue staff insisted they were just following instructions. It was a total nightmare. After we left, I went home, still in my gown, collapsed on the couch, and cried until I felt numb. My father was furious, calling the venue, calling my fiancé's parents, and demanding an explanation. Nobody gave any real answers. The next day, my ex-fiancé's father had the nerve to call my parents and say, "We can still fix this if she signs over the house. Then we can reschedule the wedding." Like we could just reboot the whole thing. My parents told him off. I blocked my ex-fiancé on my phone when he tried to pressure me, saying this was just a misunderstanding. But I wasn't about to let them walk all over me. My father is pretty protective, and he teamed up with me to talk to a lawyer. First, we looked into getting some of the wedding expenses back. I had paid a part of the venue deposit, so our attorney suggested we send a formal demand for my share. Because my ex and his parents had basically orchestrated my removal, it seemed like a good case for small claims court if they refused. While we were getting the legal stuff rolling, rumors spread around town. People were talking about how I got kicked out of my own wedding. My ex's parents tried to spin it, telling everyone I was mentally unstable and was hiding major financial problems. But I posted a short, calm statement on social media. I was asked to sign over partial ownership of my house on my wedding day. I refused. The ceremony was cancelled by my ex's family. I appreciate everyone's concern. That was all I wrote, but it got people buzzing. Folks who had been at the wedding started chiming in, saying they overheard the in-laws bragging about acquiring property. That made them look super shady. The in-laws' reaction was to double down. I heard they even called the local police, trying to file a trespassing complaint against me for the day of the wedding, which is laughable since I was the bride. The police basically ignored them once they heard the full story. More and more people in the community started distancing themselves from them. They were used to being seen as these respectable, traditional folks, so this was a big blow to their social standing. What really pushed me to go for a stronger form of revenge was when my ex's father started leaving me nasty voicemails. He claimed I owed them for the embarrassment they suffered and that I'd better come to my senses about the house. I saved every single voicemail and text, and my lawyer suggested we consider a protective order. It felt extreme, but after everything they pulled, kicking me out of the wedding, trashing my reputation, and now harassing me. I was done being nice. We filed paperwork, and while that was going on, I got a call from the venue manager. She apologized, saying the in-laws had told the staff I was an unruly guest and they had to remove me for causing a scene. The manager felt awful once she realized I was the bride. She offered some voucher for a future event, but I politely declined. I just wanted to move on and get the money I contributed back. Meanwhile, my ex tried emailing me one of those drawn-out, "please forgive me" letters. He claimed he was torn between me and his parents, that he never wanted me to sign away my house, but felt pressured. I rolled my eyes. If he couldn't stand up for me at our wedding, how was he ever going to be a real partner? I forwarded his email to my lawyer, then blocked him again when he tried to text. My father also blocked him after giving him a piece of his mind. It took a couple months, but we ended up in small claims court for the venue deposit. My ex's parents showed up with an attorney, which is a little overkill for small claims, but whatever. They tried to argue that I had abandoned the ceremony. The judge asked why the bride would be forced out of her own wedding if they really wanted it to happen. They had no good answer. I provided screenshots of texts where they threatened to cancel unless I signed the house over, plus receipts showing I had paid part of the venue cost. The judge ruled in my favor for a partial reimbursement. It wasn't a huge sum, but seeing their faces in court was totally worth it. As for the protective order, the judge granted me a temporary one, and after a few weeks later, it was extended because I had voicemails where my ex's father was basically threatening me to right this wrong. He tried to play it off as concern for his son, but the judge didn't buy it. Now, if he contacts me at all, he risks real legal trouble. Word about the court cases spread in our town. My father told me that people were whispering about how the in-laws tried to strong-arm me into signing over the house. They lost a lot of social capital. Nobody wanted to be associated with them. My ex's mother had planned some charity event at the same country club for a local organization. Hardly anyone showed up. She was apparently humiliated, which she totally deserved after the stunt she pulled at my wedding. I'm not gonna lie, there were days when I felt crushed and embarrassed, but the support I got from friend and family was a big help. My mother was devastated on the wedding day, seeing her daughter thrown out of a place we'd partially paid for. She's still upset when she talks about it, but we're trying to look forward. My father's just glad I saw their true colors before legally tying my life to theirs. I keep reminding myself that if this is how they acted leading up to the wedding, I can only imagine the nightmares that would have followed once we were actually married. In a weird twist, the drama turned into something of a cautionary tale. People in my circle started talking about it as the wedding from the Twilight Zone, warning others about how manipulative some families can be. My ex's parents went from trying to be community big shots to basically hiding from public events. My ex stayed quiet for a while, then tried to get sympathy by saying I was just following my parents' orders. That made him look spineless more than anything. For my own sanity, I decided to move forward and give myself a fresh start. I spent a weekend repainting rooms in my house, rearranging furniture, and turning it into a space that felt new, not weighed down by bad memories. I replaced the bedroom set that my ex and I had picked out together, selling it cheap online and getting something more to my taste. It was a small but powerful gesture. I was reclaiming the place that my grandparents had entrusted to me. I still have moments where I get really angry. I'll be washing dishes or folding laundry and suddenly remember standing in that parking lot in my wedding dress, feeling the gravel under my shoes and realizing that my fiancé had chosen his over me. But then I also remember the satisfaction I felt walking out of that courtroom with a judgment in my favor and the relief of not being tied to a family that would treat me like a doormat. Every time I think of the meltdown they had over not getting my house, I feel a rush of gratitude that I stood my ground. Sure, some people think I'm bitter or vindictive for taking him to court, but I don't regret it one bit. They messed with the wrong person's property. My grandparents worked their entire lives to give me that place, and I'm not about to let anyone bully me into signing it away. If the in-laws thought they could intimidate me into submission, they learned the hard way that I'm not that easy to push around. At this point, I'm just living my life, leaning on my family and friends, and focusing on the fact that I dodged a massive headache. The wedding might have been ruined, but I saved myself from a toxic marriage. I don't plan on dating seriously for a while. I'll be just hanging with friends, maybe taking a short vacation with my brother for some sun and relaxation. Sometimes people ask me what I'd say if I ran into my ex honestly. There's nothing left to say. The last time we spoke, he begged me to reconsider, saying his parents were just protective, but I told him I didn't want to live under their thumb or be used as their meal ticket. If he ever truly apologizes, I might listen, but I'm not holding my breath. He made his choices, and so did I. In the end, despite the heartbreak, I feel more confident in my own judgment. If a situation ever gives me that gut feeling again, I'm going to trust it, and I'll always remember how important it is to protect what's mine. My grandparents gave me a gift I'll cherish forever, and I'll never let a bunch of entitled people snatch it away from me. So yeah, that's my story, the day my in-laws kicked me out of my own wedding because I wouldn't sign over my house, and the way I made sure they regretted every single minute of it.